Hello, everyone, and happy snow day. It's a blizzard outside, and I'm here because this is what I do when it snows, making Lecturette 7B, a 12-tone technique part 2. If you didn't watch the first installment of this is a direct continuation, so I recommend going back and checking that out. I want to fill in a few additional pieces of the puzzle here as I continue to craft this very semi-mediocre bass clarinet 12-tone piece. I've actually changed the sample set. I was having a little trouble with that other sample sound, so it's a little bit of a different sound now. But I'll remind you, last time I created a 12-tone melody using a 12-tone piece using a 12-tone row. And this, I have several rows written here. The top one, 3-9-T4, 8-7-1-2, E5-6-0, represents the 12 pitch classes of my row. And you see them first presented here in the bass clarinet, one quarter note at a time. I added a few articulations. These numbers, which I'm about to make go away for now, are important. I left them here from the last lecture. And in this world, there are so many numbers swirling around. It's always important to know what numbers we're talking about. These numbers are the numbers of the ordered pitch class interval from note to note, which is really the definition of the sound of a 12-tone row. But for right now, it's going to be useful for me to clear these away, just to not have this be too messy. And now what I have is a 12-tone row, presented one quarter note at a time, and then I repeated that same form of the row. We'll get into what I mean by form of the row, but this is the form of this row that starts on 3. And I continued for another 3 bars of quarter notes. Just in some cases changing the registral placement. Because these are pitch classes and not pitches, it doesn't matter what octave they happen in, the identity of the row is preserved. And then you'll note here what I did. If we follow the progression of the row right here, here's an F and then a B, that's 5E, and then 5E. This is a B sharp. You know what? I'll go in and spell it as a C natural, and then a 6. And if you follow the progression of these notes, you'll see that this is actually the second row that I have listed there. It's T2 of the original row, but we're going to call it something else. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how we're going to label these different forms of the row. But right now, you can just see this is a different rhythm. We did triplets. And I transposed the whole row up by 2, preserving the ordered pitch class intervals, but not the actual succession of pitch classes, since these are, of course, different pitch classes. 5E06 is not the same as 3-9-T4, but we just think of this transposition as another form of the row. Okay, and I'll just play that much right now just to get it sort of back into our ears. You'll also notice I've slowed down the tempo to 82 from the last one. I changed a couple of dynamics. I still haven't found the sample library that's going to play this really how I'd like to hear it. Maybe that's because it's really hard, and it's hard to emulate with sampled instruments. But here's what we have. And I'm going to stop it. Oops, if I can, I'm going to stop it right there. And for right now, I'm just looking at these 2 systems. And I want to talk about how, if we were analyzing this piece or annotating our own composition, we might talk about and label these different row forms. And the first concept I want to introduce is that a row form is going to be named generally, and you'll see there's a class of exceptions, but usually we name row forms after the first element of the row, the first member of the row. In this case, we start off with a row that's going to be named after 3. right? Because we start with E flat. And because it's the first row of the piece, I'm going to call this a prime form. So I would actually call this, and I'll label this. I gotta find my, here, I already created it. I'm gonna label this P3. And then these are the 12 elements of P3. Now, when it comes to annotating a score, and this is a lot easier to do by hand than in a software program, the way that we would annotate this presentation of the row is that we are going to number each element of the row with its order position in the row. That's a new concept, order position. So I am not going to write under these notes 3, 9, T. I'm not going to label the integers because that's added stuff that we don't need. We need to know that E flat is 3, it's O is 3, A is 9. But what is unique to this composition and to this row is the relationship to each one of these notes to its row. So P3, in row P3, E flat is order position number 1. And I'm going to show order positions with circled numbers. I'll move this out of the way, right? So E flat would be 1, and then A would be, let's get back to my tool, A would be 2, B flat is 3, and I'm just going to keep going here. And this may seem very, very obvious to you when the row is laid out like this, one note after the other, but I'll give you a little hint for the future. It's not always going to be like that. Sometimes it's not going to be as clear to find a presentation of the row. And now the last thing I'm going to do, and again, this is a lot easier to do by hand, is I'm going to create a circle here. And it's going to look a little crazy, perhaps. And I'm going to double click on this, and finally I can drag the size of my circle. And what I want to do here is I want to create a circle that just encompasses the whole presentation of this row. That's pretty good, right? So now if I get out of this tool, that is an annotated 12-tone composition. And I can look at this and I can see that this is P3. And I would do the same thing over here, and I might use video technology in order to make this go a little quicker. We'll see. But you can see now when I look at this, I can see, okay, here's P3. Oh, here's P3 again. And then I have this row, and this row would be called P5. Right? It's a transposition of the original P row up 5. So I would go in here. Same thing, I'm going to put in my little labels, and I've programmed little shortcuts for these order positions, circled order position numbers. Not if you're working in note flight, which we do in this class, you might have a harder time doing that. And you just have to, work with what you have. We might be able to use colors in note flight, and I'll do a video in note flight at some point for this, but right now I want it to be here. Okay, and so we've got, now we just want to get this circle kind of not colliding there. It's not ideal to be doing this kind of annotation in any music software that I know of. I'm going to duplicate this and edit it and turn it into, this is going to be, this is going to be P5, right? And so now you see that, let's see if I can get the P5 label. You can see that I've got pretty clearly annotated. Here's P3, P3, P5, and you can tell at one glance that this is a transposition of the piece. Okay, so that is how we label, and that's the P form. Now I'm going to let this piece go a little bit longer, and I've written some other stuff, and we're going to look at it from the perspective of analysis. Not that this piece necessarily is great enough to warrant being analyzed, but it's okay. Here it is. Okay, and I'm sorry, I should have, you didn't see that very last bit. But here is an interesting development after we get to this third system. And by the way, just reminding you, these three are here. The first is the first P3 row, the second is P5. The next one is not used in the piece. It's P6. That's a lingering, and you know what, I might just, for clarity, I might get rid of it right now. I was just demonstrating in the last video how we can just transpose to any level. We could have P, there's going to be a P0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, T, and E, right? Any transpositional level could exist. This row can be transposed 12 different ways. But when I get over here, and I see a row that starts, and let's see if I can convince my program to start right at measure 8. Now, when you hear that presentation of something, my hope is that that sounds like something new but related to you. And the question is, what is the relationship of this row to the main row of the piece? Our first assumption is, well, okay, this looks like another, it looks sort of like maybe another presentation of a 12-tone row. The integers are 0, 6, 5. And when I look at this row that begins 3, 9, T, and sometimes it's helpful to just write this out, right? So I've got a row that begins 3, 9, T, and I've got another row, this is the end of a row here, so probably a row that begins 0, 6, 5. And immediately I see let's see, is there a transpositional relationship? This is T9. O is T9 of 3, right? And 6 happens also to be T9 of 9. So that's good. But when I get here, T9 or minus 3 should give me a 7 here. And instead I get a 5. And if we take it one step further, oops, that jumped around. If we take it one step further now and look, after T I have 4 here, and after 5 I have E here, we see that this isn't just an isolated incident. This now is not a T9 relationship. And in order for one row to be transpositionally related to another row, there has to be a consistent relationship from order position to order position. In other words, if order position 1 of the new row is T9 of order position 1 of the first row, that has to be true for every corresponding member of the row, right? Order position 2 in the new row would need to be T9 of order position 2 in the first row. That's not what we have here. And so now I wonder, and this would be a good place to just pause the video and see if you can tell me where this row comes from. And I'll give you a hint. It is already written out in integer form on the screen. So if you look at these row forms, it's here. But there's a trick, so I'm going to pause. Okay, hopefully you paused the video, and hopefully you found the answer is that this is actually the first row, but backwards. And backwards is a new thing for us, and it was an exciting thing for Schoenberg, who developed this technique. So if we look, if we read from right to left, it's 065E, and there it is, 065E, and then 2178, and this is 2178, and lastly 4T93, 4T93. So this is the first row, but backwards, and what we're going to call it is a retrograde, and we are going to name it not after the first note of the row, which is 0, but we're going to name it after the first row of the forward versions so that we can understand what the relationship between those two row forms is. In other words, we're going to call it R3, and when I say R3, retrograde 3, I know that I mean the retrograde of P3. I'm going to create a new kind of a label here. I will duplicate this one, and I will call this R3. All right, and then once I do that, once I call this R3, I am going to just put in my order position labels. And again, it's just 1 to 12. Now, when you're doing what's called a 12 count, which is what we're doing here, it's going to feel very basic because you're just counting from 1 to 12. But again, when you have rows shared by multiple instruments or rows that occur as chords, which is something we'll cover at some point, this clarity of annotation is very helpful. And again, I'm going to create another circle now and try to get all of this stuff within the body of that circle. So it's going to come down like this, and I'm going to move it up a little bit over here. And again, not super ideal, but possible, right? And maybe I'll try to get my R3 label inside there too, right? So now I look at this, and again, you can see how very clear it is. It's P3, P3, P5, R3, and that is the retrograde of this row. And, I have the sense that this might be a great place to stop. And I will also make a 12-tone part 3 where I talk about this last little presentation, and then I introduce the concept of the 12-tone matrix, which is a very valuable tool for composition and analysis. But for right now, just to summarize, what I've spoken about is the idea that a 12-tone row, a succession of 12 pitch classes, or a succession of ordered pitch class intervals, however you want to think about it. When we label in annotating a 12-tone score, we're going to name the row, and the prime form, this is just P3 because it's the first one, right? And just so you know, like if this row happened first, this would be P0, and then this, which is this row backwards, if this came later, this would be R0, the retrograde of P0. And we're going to use order position numbers that show the place of each pitch class in the row. So A flat is the 5th note of the row P3, okay, and 7 is the 6th, right? The row form, I should say, because the row doesn't change. One of Schoenberg's ideas is that a single row is enough to generate a multi-movement, large-scale composition. He wanted this to kind of be in line with tonal thinking, the way that the system of major and minor keys could provide a network of related forms. So that's the basic thing. And then the last thing is that we can take any of the 12 transpositions of the prime form of the row. You only see a couple here, P3 and P5. And we can play those backwards. Backwards still counts. And if you think about it, the same intervallic relationships are there. They're just backwards. But we hear a lot of tritones no matter which way we go, because a tritone inverts to a tritone. And this particular row has a lot of them. And similarly, a 1 becomes an 11, and we'll talk about that in a subsequent version. The key thing is I name the R form after its last element, but I number it going forward, right? So this is R3, the retrograde of P3, but the elements are 1, which is here, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. That's all for this one, and there's one more coming your way. Hope you enjoyed.